Sean here with BaseMint Comics. It is Sunday, January 25th, 2026, and if you've been watching the channel from the beginning, or if you're new, I'll quickly explain it. Obviously, BaseMint is because my comics are in the basement, but the mint part of it is not because I want my comics in mint collection. I took that from the name given to one of the fellows that worked at comic book shops that I've gone to throughout my life. His name was Dennis, and everybody called him Mr. Mint, and he was a great friend of mine and my pals at the comic book shop, and my wife. And today would have been his 69th birthday, but sadly, we lost him a few years ago. So years back when my, obviously, if you've been watching the channel, you know that part of my thing is biking up to comic book stores. And I used to bike up to first shop that he worked at that I went to was like a couple miles down from the house that I grew up in. It's this great store called Classic and Movie Comics Center. And I would bike up to that shop, sometimes walk up to that shop, and have great memories of me being like a little kid and buying back issues and stuff in that store. And then when he stopped working there, like kind of the comic shops in our area were a pretty tight-knit community where it's like everybody knew everybody, you know, it's kind of like a little club. He started working at a shop that I went to for decades called Back to the Past. And it's very cold and very snowy outside, and obviously with the Cornerbacks Classics, I already have the back issues, so I don't need to bike up to my shop. So there's no clips of that. But years back, Back to the Past moved from one location to another, and being a very consistent regular and at the shop a lot, they asked for my help to help them move on the day that they were moving to a new shop. And so that morning I biked up to the shop, and Denny was working there, and he let me do something that I had always wanted to do, which was bike inside of the comic book shop. So here's a clip of that, and then we'll get back to the Cornerbacks Classics.
There's no such thing as a normal dinosaur.
Yeah, why would you say that?
I'm sorry.
You gotta know that I say that's right.
I told that like a pet.
Oh, that was
I
cool.
think she's thinking about leaving before you now.
Well, we gave it 10 minutes in, and I put 3 goals in, and I could have had 2 more within the next 10 minutes.
You were on fire?
Hey, the kids are out there going, you know what? You're the dad that we would have wanted to have because you're cool.
Right.
And they fed me like a kitchen fed a bunch of people on Thanksgiving.
All right. So yeah, there was a couple laps of something that I could cross off my bucket list of, oh, I actually got to bike inside of a comic book shop, which obviously I loved. And Denny was a great guy, and I miss him dearly. Think about him all the time. And yeah, so, you know, he is part of the reasons why I love comics as much as I do. And so we're probably going to, you know, celebrate him somehow today. So, Cornerbacks Classics episode. I am in March of 1982. So, if I had pedaled up to Back to the Past or Classic or Cardomics or any of the shops that I went to as a child, I would have been gleefully choosing to pick up Amazing Spider-Man number 230, To Fight the Unbeatable Foe, released March 30th, 1982, written by Roger Stern with pencils by John Romita Jr., inks by Jim Mooney, and colors by Glennis Ween Oliver. This is obviously the conclusion to issue number 229, where Madam Web reached out because she reached out to Pete, let Pete know that she was aware that he is Spider-Man and that she needed his help in stopping this foe. Juggernaut and Black Tom Cassidy decide, like, hey, if we get this lady, because she's a precog, she can help us, you know, do bad guy stuff, and it'll make it easier, because we know the outcomes. This is full on, like, yeah, X-Men Destiny type of thing here. So in that issue, Juggernaut plucks her from her chair, which is her life support system, realizes without it that she's useless, and kind of just tosses her aside like a piece of trash, which is a very Kane Marco thing to do. This pisses Peter Parker off, and our battle begins. Great John Romita Jr. pencils in this, as Pete basically like tracks the Juggernaut through the city, does the old not slingshot, but like pulls back some like steel girders and kind of launches them at Juggernaut, but he just, crumples them and brushes them aside. Pete grabs like a wrecking ball and is spinning that around. And this is a great way of like showing off, because you see Pete fighting, street toughs and whatever, and he's always pulling his punches. But on paper, you would look at this and be like, oh, the Juggernaut's going to crush him. But people often underestimate just how strong Spider-Man is. So this is a great way. Like, it's just a fun two-parter where you get to like really show off how tough Peter is while taking on a classic villain like the Juggernaut. Who doesn't want to do that? It's awesome. So Juggernaut and Spider-Man are stomped under a building, basically, that collapses on him. And when Pete gets out of there, like, the people standing around are like, he went that away. And news is sort of trickling in that this is happening. Black Tom Cassidy is kind of waiting by the boat, expecting Juggernaut to show up with Madam Web, and he doesn't, which kind of upsets Black Tom, and he sees Spider-Man kind of swoop in. And there is like this great, like, as they catch back up to each other, Peter like drives a semi full of gas up to the Juggernaut, and there's this great, what a fantastic page by John Romita Jr. showing Pete driving the truck into Juggernaut. Great shot of his eyes through the helmet, just looking like menacing and like he doesn't even care. And then an absolutely killer explosion scene of that happening. And of course, Pete is faced with the reality of like, oh man, that didn't even stop him. And then in like classic comic book fashion, like they're tussling each other. And the end of this, as Pete is just getting absolutely hammered by Juggernaut, is that he walks into cement and then gets sort of stuck in the cement, which, is I'm sure that if someone were to read this, like if it was like a new book that came out today, people would be like, I don't know, I just feel like they'd be hypercritical of this being like the ending of it and that it wasn't more elaborate. But I just kind of like, Juggernaut just assumes that he can just like walk through anything and just get his way, like a big bully. And I just sort of like the fact that he just like stupidly walked into cement and is now stuck in it. And thankfully Pete had his camera on him and it was taking pictures. And so he is able to actually get photos to the Daily Bugle about this, much to the chagrin of Lance Bannon, his current competition when it comes to freelance photography at the Bugle. And he checks on Madam Web, who has no memory of what happened, and thankfully no memory that at the time that we know of now, that she has no memory that Peter is Spider-Man. And the issue ends with Black Tom Cassidy. Like, sort of, you feel like there's like this weird Island of Misfit Toys thing that I have towards Juggernaut and Black Tom Cassidy, where it's like, I kind of like, they're assholes, but like I enjoy their friendship. So, Tom's like bummed because he's just like, come on, he's got to get out of this at some point, and he's kind of just like waiting for him to show up, and that just doesn't happen. And I enjoy, they're bad guys, but I enjoy the fact that these two bad guys have like found each other. I don't know. Their relationship has always been something in comics that I've thoroughly enjoyed, and this is maybe one of the best kind of two-part fun, punch-ups in comics. It's great. I'm not breaking the mold by saying anything new on this, but it is a super fun Spider-Man versus, I'm a big X-Men guy, so anything with the Juggernaut in it, I'm gonna read. And it's fun to get a take of Spider-Man taking on the Juggernaut. All right, up next, Captain America number 271, The Mystery of Mr. X, released on March 30th, 1982, written by David Anthony Kraft, pencils by Alan Kupperberg, inks by John Beatty, letters by Rick Parker, and colors by Christy Scheel. Let's see. I have a very solid chunk of Captain America, but my real... I think I've talked about this with Daredevil, where my starting point with my Daredevil collection is Ben Urich's first appearance, like sort of to the present. And I really love the time period of Captain America living in a brownstone and dating Bernie Rosenthal. And so I was like, oh, that's going to be I'm going to make sure that, like, I've never read the Grunwald era, but I have it all. That's part of this, like, process, is like the Cornerbox Classic thing, is me going week to week through my comics as though I had been like picking them up that way, and this gives me the kind of the luxury and opportunity to be able to go through them as though I was a fan in 1982, even though I was only, I think, 6 months old or something at this point. So Bernie was kind of the through line of what made me go like, oh, this will be the point where I pull, like, I have, you know, the Secret Empire issues and some old, like, Jack Kirby classic Captain America stuff, but the real collection, like, begins with a few issues before, like, Steve moves into the brownstone. Anyways, just to give you an idea of the madness of my collection and what sort of triggers me to lock in on certain things, as I liked Steve, like, moving out of the mansion, getting real with the people. And it's one of the things that I think Marvel did fantastically in the 70s and 80s, is like build up a solid roster of like secondary characters. Everybody goes to Spider-Man because obviously, like, that's a high bar of like just a really great revolving cast of secondary characters that like flesh out Pete's world in a great way. I have similar feelings towards the X-Men, where there's a lot of like, one of the things that I feel like is lacking in current X-Men stories is humans. Like back in the day, in the 80s, there were like, there's Stevie Hunter, and you had, humans that worked at the school or helped out around the school. And I think that added like a solid point of view for the reader to like, not only are you like connecting with the superhero characters, but you could also visualize you being in that world through the human perspective of this. And so one of the things that I really like about this era of Captain America is him living in this brownstone and like getting to know his neighbors. Like that's it's an aspect of the soap opera of comic books that I enjoy immensely. And I think that is lost in the sauce when it comes to modern books. That's just how I feel. And, so that is all that to say that this opens up with like Cap bringing home pizza over to Bernie's apartment, and she's all jazzed because there is a all-star wrestling tournament on. This is clearly, during the 80s, so, wrestling, obviously, I think wrestling is still a big deal, but in the 80s, as a kid, I remember I am not super well-versed in the wrestling world. My brothers loved it. I have pals who love it. I believe Denny, Mr. Mint, loved it. And so this was sort of, it just was like it's nice that I'm reading this, during this time period. It made me think of him. Anyways, so Bernie, much to Steve's shock, is like, she's a super fan of wrestling. So they're watching, the whole, the thing where they like interview the guy. I'm sure everyone's familiar with wrestling, and Steve's kind of like, he's a little bit like, what the hell is going on? Which is great for him to be a little bit like thrown off by this. And sadly, in this, as they're watching this wrestling match, one of the wrestlers kills the other wrestler. And so Bernie is clearly affected by this. and Steve is like, I don't know if he's like trying, it's a little bit weird in the writing that Steve's like not just like appalled by this as a human watching, this happen. But he's sort of like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this for Bernie, which was a little weird. And so Steve goes down, basically like muscles in with his Avengers card to try to get to the bottom of this, and meets like the wrestling promoter dude, who goes by the name King Arthur. And throughout this, like, he's going back, checking on Bernie, and she sort of gives him this whole, like, I used to watch wrestling as a kid, and, like, this, it just means a ton to me, and this is obviously messing her up. So Steve's like, well, that's it. I'm going to go basically... So great. Like, this is one of those, like, I'm reading this last night, and I was like, this is comics, man. This is what I love about comics. He just randomly joins this wrestling league to, like, get to the bottom of this and F this dude up. And so he does wind up defeating him, because I think he gets called out, or, he winds up defeating this guy, and he winds up getting arrested. And so Steve's not like, some time passes, and he's like, during this time period also of while Steve's living in the brownstone, he's working as like a commercial artist. And so he decides, like, he's like, something doesn't sit right about that match. And so he decides to like go kind of undercover as like the freelance artist dude. And he goes up to the All-Star Wrestling thing, and he's like, hey, I'm like, I need video reference for some art stuff that I'm working on. And so they wind up giving it to him, and he realizes pretty quickly that like the dude he was fighting wasn't the guy that was like really to blame for what happened. And so, Steve uncovers a seedy steroid underbelly to this, and realizes that the promoter dude, King Arthur, is the bad guy working with some like drug pushers, and winds up the dude that he fought like wasn't actually the guy, and so it was really this King Arthur dude and this whole thing. So it's sort of like, it kind of wraps up rather quickly, because David Anthony Kraft isn't the writer that's normally on Cap right now, so I feel like this is kind of one of those, might have been on a deadline with the other story, and so this was just sort of thrown in. Sometimes those kind of let me down a little bit because they just feel out of place or whatever. But this like wrestling thing was just so goofy and dumb fun that I enjoyed it for just like the silliness that it was. Is it an issue that I'd be like, oh man, you have to go out and read Captain America number 271? No. But, Steve having a date with Bernie where they watched wrestling, that was, if I had pedaled up to the shop and I'd paid 60 cents for this, that would have been worth it. I would have been all about it. After that, I would have grabbed Micronauts number 43, Home Again, Jiggity Jig. I don't know. March 30th, 1982 was when this was released. It was written by Bill Mantlo with pencils by Gil Kane, inks by Daniel Bolinati, letters by James Novak, and colors by Bob Sharon. If you've been following around, I finished my Micronauts run after I had started the Cornerbox Classic thing. It's not a title that I ever picked up, other than there's an issue where Nightcrawler is in it, and I've had that issue. But beyond that, it was never anything that I planned on picking up. But there was the video is in the backlog, where there was a store in my area that was going out of business and had a great like going out of business sale, and so I went there and was able to get pretty much an entire Micronauts run for pennies on the dollar. So I was like, oh, I'll pull it in, but I was way behind on catching up, and so I've sort of been reading Micronauts like when I'm not doing new books or the Cornerbox Classic things, I'm filling in Micronauts issues as I go, and then all of this is to say I'm in like the mid 20s right now. This is obviously issue number 43, and so I'm kind of attacking this from both ends. And Pat Broderick is penciling Micronauts now in the 20s, and man, I couldn't tell you what else he's done. I should look it up after I'm done recording this. But I really, really, really love his work on Micronauts. And there was a letter in this issue where they were like, bring back Pat Broderick. And I read that, and I was like, I really am enjoying his pencils, and I'm going to be sad when he leaves the book. Obviously, Gil Kane, a master of his craft, and absolutely crushes this. But I am now very fond of Pat Broderick's artwork, and will be seeking out other things that he has done. This is one of the joys of Cornerbox Classics for me, is broadening the horizons of what I grew up with, and finding things like that. Yeah. Did I already go through the cast? Yeah, I went through the cast, I think. Anyways, written by Bill Mantlo, pencils Gil Kane, inks Daniel Bollinati, letters James Novak, and colors by Bob Sharon. So last issue, Micronaut, Bug, and Acro Year were kind of shrunk down and sent back to their home world. And Articus Ran and Devil and the Roboids, they sort of like kind of go. Thankfully, this was like a recap of the stuff that I have read when I pulled Micronauts in, like around like issue 37 or whenever my first issue of Micronauts was for Cornerbox Classics. So they kind of go over the Doctor Doom stuff and all that sort of thing. And basically they recognize that, like, everyone else might think that Bug, Marionette, and Acro Year died, but they recognize that, like, oh man, if they got shrunk down to the normal state, they probably went back to the homeworld. And so we need to get there. And so they go to the Avengers because they were just last issue helping Wasp. And so they kind of go through their history with the Avengers. So there's like a brief, 2 pages, 3 pages maybe, of like Cap, Iron Man, and Thor like talking to the Micronauts. They're not really like guest stars of the issues, but it's a bit of a cameo. And basically, like, they're like, oh, we can't really help you. We don't have any, Hank Pym is currently not an Avenger because of all of his crap that he's got going on at this time period. So, like, we don't really have anything that can shrink you down to get you there. And they're like, hey, can we at least get a ride to the one place that does, which is, like, the Human Engineering Life Laboratories down in, I believe, Florida. The Hell Lab, where the bad guys in the Micronauts are kind of based out of. So the Avengers are like, hell yeah, we can do that. We can fly you down there. And so they do. And, they're breaking into the lab, and that is where they run into Computrex, the bad guy, and he unleashes Professor Prometheus. Like, he's put him back together, who was the big bad from the early, like, not Baron Karza, but beyond that, he's one of the bad guys in the Micronauts books. And so that's where it sort of ends, is with Professor Prometheus coming back from the dead in this. So I, like, it's a buddy of mine who, like, loved the Micronauts when he was growing up as a kid in the 80s. And so he was like, oh man, you should read Micronauts. And I'm enjoying it, but it sort of falls into that category of, like, I don't know how much rereadability there is for Micronauts for me. It's enjoyable. I am enjoying the opportunity to be able to read it the once, but this is also sort of a part of the Cornerbox Classic thing, is like, do I hold on to this because I'm going to reread it a bunch, or do I pass it on to someone else who would love it more than I do? We shall see. I'm not throwing in the towel. I threw in the towel too early on Moon Knight. I will admit that. I had an entire run of the 80s Moon Knight and was like, this is not doing it for me. And I do sort of regret getting rid of that. What are you going to do? That's life. The last issue I would have pedaled up to the shop if I had the ability to, March 30th, 1982, would have been Thor number 321, Magic's Menace, released March 30th, 1982. Obviously written by Doug Mensch, pencils by Alan Kupperberg, inks by Chick Stone, letters by Janice Chang, and colors by George Roussos. And so this is following up on where, like, Silver Chalice and the Thor's in Chicago, and a bunch of humans were turned into old gods called the Menagerie. And so Thor takes these characters, like, to Asgard, winds up he winds up taking them to Asgard, and sort of leaves them with Heimdall, because he believes that Loki is behind, like, changing them into this and needs to get this kind of solved. He goes and confronts Loki about this, and Loki is basically like, nope, had nothing to do with it. And he starts to explain that, like, the history is that, like, this character named Rimthasar is the one that, like, is in charge of these creatures, and gives kind of the whole history of that. And then and Thor realizes during this, like, oh man, this isn't Loki. He realizes that it is Rimthasar, and he has now placed a spell over the Menagerie, so they're no longer, like, just kind of, like, happy-go-lucky, like, hey, we're happy to be gods. Like, they are now, like, actively attacking people, and have sort of, like, Heimdall's like, hey, I'm watching the bridge, I can't watch the, like, I can, if they leave, that's on them. Like, I can't really, I'm not a babysitter. And so they sort of head back to Earth and start messing stuff up. And Rimthasar is there, and he goes to get the chalice, and Thor winds up destroying the chalice in the battle. And this, unfortunately, like, traps the Menagerie as the gods. So, like, they can't turn back to their normal mortal human forms, and Thor feels terrible about this. But the Menagerie are like, hooray, we get to still be these cool gods. This is awesome. But Thor is like, and the issue ends with him being like, okay, it wasn't Loki. I've busted up this chalice and messed this up. So now I need to go. I gotta go get my dad. Dad's gonna fix it. So he goes after, it ends with him being like, well, up next, Odin. Let's see if Odin can fix this. So that is Corner Box Classics for this week. Those would have been the 4 books that I would have picked up on March 30th, 1982. This has been a nice little, like, because sometimes I buy my new books, and I'm like, some of this stuff is great, some of it's absolute garbage. And this has been, like, a nice little, like, not everything was firing on all sides. I mean, I look back on that time period and I'm like, man, that's, I was talking to a buddy of mine who kind of grew up in this era. I was a 90s kid. Like, I got into comics in the 90s, and he was obviously, like, late 70s, 80s. And, I mean, that was the time. That was a great time. But it's also, like, it's a little bit like music too. Like, everybody talks about specific bands from certain eras, and some other ones that were, like, great bands sort of get lost in the conversation. And that's a little bit how I feel about some of these titles, where it's like, well, of course we're going to go and talk about the Roger Stern era of, Spider-Man, and the Frank Miller era of Daredevil, and sort of everybody goes back to those things. But, like, there's stuff in here that's, like, just fun comics, and that's what I'm looking for. And that's the whole purpose behind Corner Box Classics, is digging into the fun of my collection and finding hidden little gems that, like, I don't think everybody's talking about. There's probably, I say this every time that I, like, Corner Box Classics hits, like, a Frank Miller Daredevil, is like, I don't really know, other than my own, like, nostalgic feeling. I'm not bringing some deep-seated philosophical analysis to this Frank Miller run that hasn't already been talked about. Whole point is, like, this is my experience reading these comics, some of them as a kid and some of them as an adult. And the other thing that I've truly loved about, like, kind of revisiting stuff from, this happened a lot when I reread X-Men stuff. Like, I get new things out of them every time that I revisit them. And every age that I go back and reread some of these classic tales, it's like I get a new perspective. It's nice, you know. Like, you know, I look at books differently now that I'm a parent, that I didn't when I was just like, you know, just me, you know. I read certain things as a kid that, like, now I look back and I'm like, you know, you get it. It's an interesting thing. I would re-looking at stuff with fresh eyes. It's good. So, that is it. If you've been paying attention for all of this, I really appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Ever since I did the room tour, there's been a nice uptick. It's nice. This is what I do. Yeah, so if this is your first video, welcome. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, please do. That would help out. Comment away in the comments. I like chatting about this sort of stuff. Obviously, I hope that this feels, you know, like we're just hanging out, chatting about comic books, and the only way that I can get any feedback is through the comment section. So let me know. All right, so I'm gonna get out of here and go enjoy some cake or something in Mr. Mint's honor, and we will be back for New Comic Book Wednesday. So on New Comic Book Day, obviously we bike up to the shop. It is like we got so much snow. It has been so cold. Obviously, if you go back and watch last Wednesday's one, it was a struggle getting up to the shop, and we have gotten even more snow. I have last Wednesday of the month, I have a work meeting that's kind of like in between shifts that I facilitate for two groups that I work with. Or, you know, anyways. So Wednesday, there might not be biking. We might just take the car, because I also have, when that meeting is over with, Henry is being picked up by his aunt so that my wife and I can get some Thai food and marathon Wonder Man, because I'm very excited. I love that character, and I'm very excited about Wonder Man. And when I found out that they were just dumping all the episodes at once, I got bummed, because now that I am a parent, I can't just sit around and marathon 8 hours of a Marvel show. So in an effort to not get spoiled, I'll probably watch an episode or two on Tuesday night after the little guy goes to bed. And then after that work meeting, I'm going to have my sister take him for a little bit so we can try to get that crossed off the list, because I've been looking forward to it. So there's that. So hopefully I can get the New Comic Book Day video done before that meeting, because otherwise I'm going to be watching Wonder Man. So who knows? Anyways, we'll be back this week with the new comic book thing. Who knows? I might even ride the bike anyways. I might have enough time. Yeah, who knows? I can do whatever I want. All right, thanks for watching, and thanks for taking this ride with us. Bye.